Meetings with leaders from our hemisphere, including bilateral meetings with President Biden and Congress, as well as with President Fernandez of Argentina, President Abinader of the Dominican Republic, Prime Minister Holness of Jamaica, Prime Minister Motley of Barbados, Prime Minister Davis of the Bahamas, and President Castillo of Peru. We discussed trade and economic growth, promoting and protecting democracy, climate action, gender equality, LGBTQ rights, and the rights of Indigenous people. We need to deliver for people. We need to make sure they see themselves in the progress we make. This is something we talked about during the roundtable I hosted with progressive leaders on Wednesday with Barbados, Belize, Chile, Ecuador, and Jamaica. We're continuing our work to eradicate poverty, strengthen the middle class, address food shortages, and grow truly equitable economies, ones that are diverse, with true gender equality, to gender and racial equity and equality. This week, we also discussed challenges like global inflation. Everyone agrees that we need to do more to make life more affordable for our citizens. It starts with strong, inclusive institutions that underpin our work to tackle the many challenges we face. We can't let authoritarian forces undermine our democracies or institutions, including online. We were very clear that Canada is committed to help safeguard democracy in the digital age and will continue to stand up for human rights, media freedom, and equality. Just like we'll continue to stand up for Ukraine while making sure Russia is held accountable. We're working with partners throughout the Americas to support Ukrainians who've been displaced. On fait aussi notre part pour faire face à la crise migratoire. Le Canada s'engage à accroître ses efforts de promotion et de recrutement liés au programme d'immigration francophone, à accueillir plus de 50 000 travailleurs agricoles du Mexique, du Guatemala et des Caraïbes en 2022. It will also increase refugee resettlement from the Americas and welcome 4,000 additional individuals by 2028. Canada has one of the most progressive, generous, and welcoming immigration policies in the world, and we continue to welcome hundreds of thousands of people from all over the globe. We're committed to continue working with partners to address the migration crisis, and we fully endorse the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection. At this summit, Canada has mobilized our partners to work together on the biggest challenges we face, which includes on climate action. We worked with Barbados and other countries on the need for accessible financing to help vulnerable middle-income island states prepare and respond to the effects of climate change. Avec le Chili, on a coparrainé une déclaration qui réunit les pays pour protéger l'océan Pacifique. Et hier, on a fait équipe avec Californie pour protéger la nature, stimuler l'investissement dans les technologies propres, éviter que les plastiques à usage unique se retrouvent dans nos océans. We know there's more work to be done on our shared priorities. This week, we continue to make progress. We're announcing investments of over $145 million on different initiatives across the Americas. This includes initiatives on fighting climate change, on promoting gender equality, on addressing irregular migration, and on strengthening our democracies and our health systems. Together, we're working hard to build a better future for everyone. The Hemisphere, as always, can count on Canada to be there as a partner. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Nous avons maintenant 20 minutes pour des questions. Et we now have 20 minutes for questions. One question, one follow-up. Madeleine?
Monsieur Trudeau, Madeleine Lemorin de Radio-Canada, il y a des millions de personnes déplacées sur le continent. Je me demande comment votre gouvernement est arrivé au chiffre de 4 000 personnes réinstallées supplémentaires d'ici 2028.
La réalité, c'est que le Canada sera toujours là pour aider de façon généreuse pour la crise migratoire. Et effectivement, on augmente nos contributions en termes d'accueillir des immigrants et des réfugiés de plus. Mais on sait aussi que ça prend plus que de recevoir des gens qui fuient pour un monde meilleur. Ça prend des investissements pour qu'ils n'aient pas besoin de quitter chez eux, pour qu'ils aient des appuis, une démocratie solide, de la sécurité, des opportunités pour l'avenir. Et c'est là aussi qu'on est en train de travailler. We know that, yes, Canada will always be there to continue to step up in all sorts of ways on welcoming people to Canada as we have over the past years, as we have over the past decades and even centuries. But we also know that countering the migration crisis doesn't just mean taking more and more people. It also means making smart investments so people don't feel like they have no other option than to leave their homes, leave their communities, leave their countries. We know that investing in good governance, in stable democracies, in safety, security, and economic opportunity across the hemisphere will do a lot to counter the migratory pressures, and that's exactly what we're committed to doing.
Excusez-moi d'insister, mais pourquoi 4 000? Comment vous êtes arrivé à ce chiffre?
On a parlé avec les Américains sur cette initiative particulière. Ils ont demandé ce qu'on pouvait faire. Ils ont parlé des contributions d'autres pays. On a mis de l'avant un chiffre qui est positif, qui va contribuer, qu'on va continuer de veiller à faire. Mais on est toujours là pour en faire plus. Mais on est content de pouvoir contribuer aux initiatives américaines.
Okay. Prochaine question, Rafi.
Hello, Prime Minister Rafi Vijaykanyan, CBC News. If Bill C-19 passes, the $123 million the RCMP have seized in Russian assets will be allowed to be sold for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Will all of that money be sold? And if not, why not?
We're still a ways from passing that legislation. Obviously, there are lots of conversations going on internationally about accountability and about the seized assets of Russian oligarchs and others. We will continue to make sure we're following the law, but also moving forward on ways to make sure that Russia is held responsible and even accountable for what will be tremendous costs in rebuilding Ukraine after Russia's illegal invasion.
And who gets to spend that money? Is it a business? Is it a foreign government? How do you make sure the money stays out of corrupt hands?
Again, we're a long way from that moment right now, but as with just so many things in regards to the conflict in Ukraine, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. It is going to be important that Ukrainians themselves, who have a strong democracy and good civil society institutions and a level of transparency and accountability that is reasonable, that they be at the heart of whatever rebuilding ends up happening. They have to be in full consultation and even in control of the path for the future of Ukraine.
Next question.
Hi, it's Annie Bertrand-Oliver with CTV National News. I'm just going to go back to my colleague's question. You're announcing $145 billion for the region today, but the biggest, most pressing issue is the millions of migrants who are outside of their home and have nowhere to go. Does Canada not have a bigger role to play in accepting more than just 4,000 people over the next 6 years?
We welcome in over 1% of our population in permanent residence every year. Over 400,000 people come to Canada every year, and we welcome in refugees fleeing from all corners of the globe, including from our hemisphere, but in addition to Ukrainians, in addition to Afghan refugees, in addition to Syrians. We will continue to be there as the generous country that Canada always is. But it's not simply enough to simply say, we'll just keep accepting people. We need to do that, and we will, because that's the country we are. But we also need to be making deliberate and targeted efforts to make sure people don't feel compelled that the only choice they have is to put themselves and their family at tremendous risk in order to leave their communities and their country. That's where institution building, that's where working to stabilize democracies, to create more security, but also to create economic opportunity throughout the hemisphere was an issue that kept coming up throughout this summit, and one that we will continue to work on.
And on a different subject, your government continues to support mask mandates in the House of Commons and in federally regulated places like airports, for example. But it appears that you wear a mask inconsistently and depending on different situations. The Ontario government is lifting the remaining mask mandates very shortly. Do you still believe that a mask mandate should be in place, and if so, in what types of situations?
First of all, I understand how tired everyone is of the pandemic, of the different rules and restrictions that we have to go through. But most people understand that this pandemic is not over yet. We continue to see our hospitals filled with people suffering tremendous consequences. We continue to see more spreads. We continue to run the risk of new variants. And every step of the way, we will continue to be guided by the very best science we can, because our first and primary responsibility is to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep people safe.
Next question.
Ukraine today, the National Security Advisor said Ukraine is losing 100 to 200 soldiers dead every day. It has burned through almost all of the smart ammunition it received from Canada and other countries. It's burning through 5,000 to 10,000 shells a day and will run out at some point fairly soon. I know that Canada gave howitzers and bought ammunition also additionally to that. But given the fact that Ukraine appears to now be losing territory, losing people at an unprecedented scale, what more can you do than the $500 million you've already pledged? We gave 4 howitzers. Norway, a much smaller country, just gave 22. What more can you do to stop that?
We have been there with equipment, and we will be continuing to be there to support Ukraine with whatever they need, whatever we can give. And what we don't have to give, as you point out, we've set aside $500 million for international purchases to send Ukraine the issues that they need, the supports that they need. We had many conversations over the course of the summit with friends and allies from across the hemisphere about how important it is that we all stand together in support of Ukraine and in condemnation of Russia's illegal actions that are not just putting democracy and Ukrainians at risk, but are directly leading to food insecurity, to higher gas and fuel prices around the world that are particularly hitting the global south. Canada is there to support Ukraine. We are there to fight for democracy, but we are also there to support our friends in the global south around the world who are facing terrible consequences because of Vladimir Putin's illegal and unconscionable actions.
Your government today lifted the requirement for random testing at airports. I'd just like to ask about the vaccine mandate requirement to board a flight, including domestic flights. Canada appears to be the last country in the world to have that requirement. We saw Transport Minister say there's a trade-off between public health and economic activity. I'd like to ask you, where in that equation do you factor in individual liberty, personal autonomy, the right, the fundamental human right to mobility?
Throughout this pandemic, Canadians were very clear that keeping their neighbors, keeping our frontline workers safe was the top priority. The freedom from sickness and disease, the freedom to be able to get through this pandemic as quickly as possible by leaning on science, which involved vaccine mandates, which, incidentally, we had an election that was almost entirely focused on, and Canadians resoundingly voted in favor of parties that said they were going to bring in vaccine mandates to keep Canadians safe. And that's one of the reasons we got to close to 90% vaccination rate in Canada. And the pandemic and the results of the pandemic on a health scale were far less serious in Canada, despite all the tragedies and loss we did face, than in many other countries. And on top of that, our approach of following the best public health advice actually led to better outcomes in terms of reopening, in terms of getting back businesses, in terms of economic recovery. We've recovered 115% of the jobs lost since February 2020, when the United States has only recovered about 95% of those jobs. We put the health and safety of Canadians first. We put economic recovery as a priority as well. And every step of the way we followed science to do that, and that's exactly what we're going to continue to do.